Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, my neighbor tried to steal a part of my land and made a false police report to get me arrested. I ended up taking her property instead. Here is what happened in this revenge neighbor story. When it comes to stories about crazy neighbors, I have one that I think fits perfectly in here with everyone else's. These people were insane and it took years for this story to get an actual resolution. Luckily, it ended up great for me, which is why I want to share it with everybody here. For a little context, I bought my house about 11 years ago and I didn't see something that I know now as a red flag. My wife and I were first-time home buyers and just didn't know to look for certain things. Especially when something seemed to be a little too good. The house had been on the market for a while and was selling for less than most other houses in the area, despite being fairly new. Also having 3 owners in the last 7 years, which looking back now made sense. We took a tour and everything seemed fine, so we got the house without questioning why it was cheaper or why so many people seemed to move in and then out of it. That answer came the day we moved into the house and met the couple that lived next door to us. I cannot use their real names because I get paranoid, so I will just call them Fran and Ken for this story, but sorry if those are anybody's names reading this, I picked them randomly. They came over before we even finished unpacking everything to welcome us into the neighborhood. Only the more they talked, the weirder the vibe we got from these people were. Making comments that we would get along fine as long as we made sure to follow the rules. Rules that I didn't know what they were talking about, because it was not like an HOA kind of situation. Neither my wife nor myself are great at telling people flat out that it's time to go. We always are the people to just use hints like, well, we got a lot of unpacking to do, or it was great meeting you. Hints that are not really that subtle and people would pick up on easily without being offended. Fran and Ken either did not get the hint or did not seem to care. They followed us from room to room talking about things that we didn't care about, namely, they were complaining about each and every other person that lived on the block and why we should hate them too. That we should really only be friends with them because everyone else was just horrible and made the street bad. Even talking about the people that used to live in the house as if they were still there causing grief, I tried to zone them out for as long as I could and after about an hour, finally got them to go back to their own house and let us unpack. I think they were trying to stop us from meeting other neighbors because once they left, others came with much shorter and calmer introductions. With Ken and Fran kind of lurking from their property, this one guy that lived across the street from me seemed cool, so I decided to bite the bullet and ask him. Me, are those guys okay? Neighbor, oh, Fran and Ken? Total nightmares, honestly. They keep harassing people so bad that they end up moving. We all try to ignore them, but just be warned that Fran is a little trigger happy when it comes to calling the police. Me, seriously? She will just call the cops on people? Neighbor, you're not truly one of us until you get your first Fran police call. This was all done quietly, so nobody could hear what we were talking about, and I told my wife about it later. The next day, we got an invitation from Fran and Ken to come over to their house for dinner. Personally, I didn't want to go, but from what I was already seeing about them, snubbing a dinner invite might not end great. We went and they once again would not stop talking about how bad all the other neighbors were. Fran even bragging about how she would call the cops on them with Ken smiling like he was proud of it. I was just laughing nervously until he kind of dropped the ball on the real reason, then he invited us over. Ken, since you're here, I was hoping that we could talk about something regarding the property between ours. Me, is there something special to know about it? Fran, well, we do expect you to make sure that you are doing your fair share. I cannot even begin to tell you about the last couple that lived here that refused to fix anything or make the property line the way it needed to be. Why is it always people that cannot seem to shut up being the ones that say they cannot begin to talk about something? They can and do more than anybody else. My wife said, I don't think I follow exactly what you are talking about here. If you're worried about us like cutting our grass, I can assure you that we are neat people. Ken, it's about the hedge. I didn't mention it before, but the back half of the side of the property had a hedge that separated the properties, turning into a fence that turned on both sides towards the homes, giving us each an enclosed backyard with only a minimal amount of actual fence needed. I assumed he was talking about making sure that our side of it didn't become overgrown or anything like that. So I assured him that we were neat and did not have any issues keeping our side looking nice. But that wasn't what the two of them wanted. They claimed that the entire hedge was on our property and that meant that we were responsible for maintaining both sides of it, as well as both sides of the fence, despite not even being able to get to their side of the hedge because it was enclosed on their side of the property. I tried to tell them that, but they refused to listen and demanded that the entire thing be taken care of by us. It really rubbed me the wrong way, but I told him vaguely that he didn't need to worry about the hatch, not saying I would do it, but getting me out of there and able to see what was going on with it. I did not know where the property markers were exactly, and it wasn't because I couldn't find them. It was because I found multiple sets of them feet apart. I had no idea if it was rezoned or what, but basically, it was not possible to tell where the property ended. I did not press on things further and just let it go as them being a little crazy. That it wasn't worth starting a whole fight over 5 extra minutes trimming a hedge. Years went by and our relationship with Ken and Fran did not improve at all. What did get better was our relationship with everybody else, who was amazed how long we lasted living next to them. Especially since we somehow managed to not get a single call to the police against us from Fran. I saw the police a lot though, because it was true that she seemed to call them for every little thing, no matter how stupid. Claiming that people being in the street meant they were on her property and she wanted them arrested for trespassing. She also once called on people for being too loud when she was trying to sleep. When it was actually like 3 in the afternoon and the noise was just kids getting home from school and being a little loud because, well, they are children. I think over the years one of the dumbest things I saw her call the police for was one of our neighbors having bright flashing lights and creating a commotion, when it was clearly visible to everybody that the noise was caused by an ambulance. Called because a 93-year-old woman fell down on ice. Like, how stupid and heartless can this couple be? Our luck did run out eventually, and then Fran called the police on us too. We were in our backyard using our pretty small and totally legal fire pit. And calling it that is honestly even pushing it, because the flame barely comes up over the metal grating thing. That did not stop her from calling and claiming that we were trying to set the entire place on fire. Cue the police, fire trucks, and scared neighbors running out of their homes to see what the problem was. Fran was in her own backyard, still screaming that there was a fire and demanding that it be put out. She was not stopping, and they asked us to just put it out for the night in order to calm things down. They are advised when called about even a controlled fire to tell the people to put it out. Probably a loophole that Fran liked to use in order to get her way. Anyway, I was getting sick of her and we even contemplated moving away like all the other people before us had done. The problem with that is we are too petty for that kind of thing. Something inside of us just screams that if somebody is gonna try and mess with us, we will pick the nuclear option and watch everything go ablaze. Metaphorically, of course, since even our small fire caused the police to show up. Speaking of which, the police knew that Fran and Ken were crazy but couldn't do anything about it. Her calls were always just within the realm of real enough so that she couldn't get in trouble for misuse of services. Like a crappy gray zone that annoyed even the police, who were tired of coming out here and dealing with these dumb complaints. We had actually forgotten about the entire issue with the property markers until we started looking back about how they always had been such bad neighbors. At this point we had discovered the beauty of the internet and people posting all about their bad neighbors, bosses, in-laws, etc., and more importantly how they were able to get justice. We always saw these things as complicated. Our original plan was to just egg Fran on to call the cops on us a bunch in a short period of time. An action that would easily get the police angry at her and maybe cause something to actually get done. Instead, we decided on something that first wouldn't waste the time of the officers, so we got a property surveyor to come out and tell us where the actual property line was. When he arrived, we even showed him the multiple different ones, which made us unsure about where the lines really were, and one interesting thing he could tell us was that nobody from the actual city would have just left old ones if it did get rezoned. He also needed to check things on Fran and Ken's side of the property, which they started screaming their heads off about, refusing him entry and trying to keep him off even though he was with the city on official business and he was allowed to be there. Due to too many existing in general and being way deeper than they should have, almost hidden, he had to dig them all up. Now, I think this is not the case for every city, but where we live, these property markers get a stamp on them. An official kind of thing that almost none of the other markets had. They had fake ones placed, and based on how angry Ken was, I'm fairly sure that he was the one that put the fake ones there. None of the ones on our property were actually the real ones, and instead they were hidden deep in the ground and covered up. Where, you might ask? Well, about 12 feet from the hedge into Ken and Fran's property. So actually, it was true, the hedge was on our property, but so was a good chunk of their backyard. They were the ones that put up the hedge too, according to city records, doing it when nobody was living in the house and then trying to pretend it was part of their property like the entire time. The other fakes were most likely from the other people moving in and out. They had slowly been putting in fake markers every single time somebody moved away to get more and more land. Now, if it was only a few feet and they were good people, I would not even care. But they were proper a-holes and I finally had a decent chance to teach them a good lesson. The surveyor put in an order to have new property markers put down. I called the company to remove the hedge and the fencing so I could have full access to the full extent of my property. With plans to then later put another fence as close to the property line as legally possible, Fran and Ken were throwing a fit the entire time and screaming at all the workers that were coming and doing this. Even calling the police again, claiming they were trespassing, to which we just pointed out the new property markers and the fact that none of them were stepping a foot on Fran and Ken's property. Their hedge being removed almost caused an even bigger fight as Fran was screaming she paid for it and owned it. I told her that if she wanted it so bad she could have it after they dug it up and planted it somewhere else on their own property. She got red in the face and got Ken, who came out and screamed that I was harassing and abusing his wife. Despite workers being there and a nice new security camera, I had other plans for as well. After a few months we had a fence set up where it actually should be, with Ken and Fran not happy about the outcome of things. Especially since they had to remove parts of their patio because it was considered on our side of the property. Watching that get taken down was also a little bit satisfying. Not just for us either, but all the neighbors that had fallen hands to these crazy people. Now, you might wonder what the security camera was for, and it was because I had a suspicion that something would happen. I know from life and online that dumb people never seem to learn their lesson and make the same mistakes over and over again. Ken did just that, as one night he broke a hole in the fence and then tried to dig up the property markers and actually move them again. As if they are the law or something and not just a thing to tell you where it is. I got that on camera and sent it straight to the police. I cannot say for sure, but I guess they were happy to finally go to that house and arrest Ken on a misdemeanor charge. Because obviously messing with property markers is illegal, they had no proof of the other ones, but this time I got it on camera and he was going to court. Plus, I was filing a civil case against him for breaking a hole in my fence. Now, for the fence, he was ordered to pay me $250 to repair the section. For the criminal court, he was given a fine that I'm not sure on the amount of. Since they are such arrogant and cocky people, they decided that they were just not gonna pay. Not based on not having the money or anything, just because they didn't agree with the court. I'll admit that before I didn't know what happened if the court said to pay up and you just flat out refused, what would happen. I never heard of it happening before, as even the most stubborn people listen to what the court tells you. It turns out though that it gets you a bench warrant where you get to tell the judge that you didn't agree and won't pay. This caused Ken to actually get 3 months in jail due to the lack of payment. Then when he got out he was forced to finally pay. At this point, nobody in the neighborhood was putting up with either of them and started fighting back in their own petty ways, skirting in the gray area themselves to find reasons to get Fran and Ken in their own trouble. I know that they got arrested once more, but I don't know exactly for what. I just know that they were screaming at another neighbor and I think Fran threw something at them. About 2 months ago, Fran and Ken moved out of the neighborhood to everybody's delight. It felt like a weight being taken off your chest that you didn't even know was there. I could finally breathe again and was just so relieved from it all. In a way, I have to thank them for it, because if they didn't try and steal a part of my land, I would not have been able to get this kind of revenge that snowballed. And I certainly wouldn't have ended up being able to buy their property when they moved away. So yeah, we decided to actually buy the property once they moved out because of how small of a plot it really was. We now want to tear down the house and use the land as like a community garden or something. It's something my wife has always been passionate about and dreamt of doing, so we might as well do it. If it doesn't work, we can always sell the land again. It's not like they are coming back. And the next one is a story from r/amIthebutthole. So when my husband and I were looking at houses, we found this great one with a pool in the backyard. Normally it would have been out of our price range, but this one was a great deal. The reason why was because of one of the neighbor's children had drowned in the pool last summer. I know it's really morbid, but my husband and I discussed it and we decided we could look past it. I mean, we could never otherwise afford anything like it. It was big enough that all of our kids could finally have their own bedrooms. When we had moved in, the pool was empty and we did not see the point in filling it since at the time it was too cold to go swimming anyway. Since it's getting hot out now, we decided to finally fill it last week. Our kids had a great time swimming and we were having fun laughing and playing games. Later though, my husband was confronted by our neighbor, the one whose kid died, saying that the sounds of kids playing in the pool was traumatizing to his family and that we were horrible for letting our kids play in that pool after what happened. Since then, we have learned from an online post that several other people in the neighborhood similarly feel that we are being insensitive by letting our kids play in the pool. Many of them thinking that the right thing to do would have been to get rid of the pool or fill it up. Even considering it all though, we don't really want to get rid of our pool. We never had a pool before, but now we are really enjoying it and our kids do too. More info, we have noticed a lot of comments are telling us to put in a fence. We already have a tall fence that is completely solid, not see-through, and we always keep the gate locked. Also, the child in question died while swimming during a pool party. Comment number 1, not the a-hole. I can understand how those sounds could be traumatizing to the family who lost the kid, but it's really not reasonable to expect that pool to never be used again. And also, calling you horrible for using your own pool is completely out of line even if they are grieving. I hope you can come to some kind of agreement that can respect their feelings, but in the end, it's your pool in your yard and it's not anyone else's business if you use it or not, regardless of what your neighbors think about it. Comment number 2, not the a-hole. If they wanted the pool filled in, they should have bought the property and done it. Leaving it empty is a hazard as well. What if the kids were playing around it and fell in and hit their head? It's not their property. If it's a sore spot for them, they should move. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would agree with this. Obviously, OP and his family are not the a-holes for using the pool that is on their private property. However, then again, I can understand the neighbors and how difficult it must be for them, but seriously, they have no legal recourse and probably also no moral recourse to really tell OP what to do. Maybe they can come to some kind of agreement, but honestly, I'm not sure what even to do there. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about this, whether OP is the a-hole or not. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I have a neighbor living next to me that is a Karen and the most entitled person I've ever had the displeasure of meeting. Most of the time it never involved me and would just be random things I would hear about. Like for one, she did not think it was fair that she had to bring the trash to the curb and felt like it was the garbage collector's job to go into her side yard and do it themselves. Not because she is disabled or anything, just because she is lazy. And there's also a husband and 2 sons that play contact football in the house, so I am sure somebody is physically able to do it. My property is larger than hers and she finds this to be totally unfair. I don't know what world she lives in where everything is the same size, but I would hate for her to see a map of the entire country. Anyway, she tried to go to the town and claim that the property line was wrong and that she was the real owner of a portion of my land. Before anything could even be decided, she was so cocky that she built a fence where she thought the right property boundary was. I was calm and knew to just wait for the town to tell her off and report the fence as being illegal and on my property. Karen then came to my house even and told me that if I was a good neighbor, I would let her have the land. When I told her no, she called me greedy and claimed that she needed it more than I did, but could not give a single reason why. Probably because she did not have one and just wanted more land to fit her ego in. Anyway, I was not too worried since I knew I was in the right and the town would sort things out without me needing to do much else. A real surveyor came and confirmed that there were no issues and the original line was still valid and my property was just bigger. She was ordered to have the fence removed and things would go back to normal. It was a fairly typical story, and if it was the only thing that happened, it would not even be worth posting. I did not need to go into court and she didn't do anything too crazy or wacky. I figured she was just entitled and not insane. However, from the title of the story and the fact that there is a story, you know this is not where things end. A couple months later, it was my kids' spring break from school and took time off so we could all go on vacation. I promised that if they both got good grades and did not get into any trouble, they could have as much input on the trip as me. It's a good system and makes it so things don't get too out of control and everybody has fun. We pick where we go and everybody gets to do their own research and pick activities. Now, we were meant to be gone for 6 days, but on the 4th day of the trip, I got a phone call. Despite being off from work, there were some issues and I had been getting the occasional email and phone call I could not ignore. I felt bad about it and assumed this call was another instance of that. Instead, when I picked up, I was connected to a lawyer's office that I never heard of before. My initial thought was somebody was in trouble or something. Me, hello? Lawyer, is this OP? Me, yes. Lawyer, we've been attempting to contact you at home for the past 3 days. After talking and having a hard time getting him to actually tell me what was going on, I got an answer. According to them, a tree on my yard damaged property and I was being sued for responsibility. They did not seem to care that I was on vacation and demanded that I come home and deal with the situation and get a lawyer of my own. There is nothing worse than having to tell your kids vacation is ending early. They did not deserve it, but they honestly handled it better than I expected. Maybe I just still see them as little kids, but they coming out just a little disappointed but not complaining made me think that I'm doing a decent job raising them. Anyway, I couldn't get any more details about what tree and what damage they were even talking about. It was not until I got home that I finally saw what everything was about. In my area, there are a lot of very old and very large trees, one of which is a white pine tree that is probably the biggest one in my yard. It stands on the side of my property between my house and Karen's house. This is a tree she has complained about multiple times for creating too much shade. It is a healthy and old tree that I wouldn't want to cut down in the first place. Even if I did, the laws about tree cutting here are very strict to avoid these old trees from being destroyed for no reason. Getting a permit to destroy a tree here basically has to show the tree is dead or shows danger of falling and causing damage. My tree was standing up tall and did not even have any low branches that could be an issue. The damage was that the white pine tree was down and smashed right over Karen's house. There was a ton of damage done to the roof and most likely other damage that I could not even see and would not be able to see until the tree was removed. Apparently they were not going to remove it and instead waited for me to pay for its removal, also claiming that I had to give them money to stay at a hotel because it was unsafe to live in the house. So there were 2 big issues with their claim of my tree just falling and destroying their home. The first was that there was no kind of storm or high winds or anything that would cause the tree to go down. To my knowledge, a healthy tree does not just fall down anyway, but I'll admit I don't know much about trees. What I do know is that when the stump has a clear cut that seems to be made by a chainsaw and sawdust is all over the grass, something clearly went down. Trees might be able to fall, but they do not just cut themselves down. I had a strong idea of what happened here and I was not gonna let Karen get away with it. I took pictures of everything just in case and got a lawyer. I made it clear right away that I was not going to settle or give Karen a dime to fix her house because I knew there was some foul play on her end. My lawyer sent theirs my response plus my photo evidence that the tree had been cut down and did not just fall like they had claimed. The back and forth went on for a while before we all figured nothing was going to get resolved and a judge would have to rule on which party was at fault for this issue. I guess the photos I sent caused them to change their story because in court suddenly things had changed drastically from the tree just falling over. According to Karen and her husband, I hired a company to cut down my tree without obtaining any types of permits. A company they claimed was most likely not even insured and did not use any safety precautions when taking the tree down. Then, when it fell on their house, they claimed the men ran away and I went into my house and refused to answer the door for them. All of this testimony had dates and of course pictures of the damages, as well as a bill for what they say it would cost to repair their house back into the state it was meant to be. They did not even realize that they had dug themselves into a hole that I was not gonna let them get out of. I had so many family photos and receipts from my trip that included things like the date, etc. It was clear without a doubt that we are not anywhere near the house when the tree was cut down, and I also had the original report of them claiming it fell, even though now they claim seeing the men cutting it down. My lawyer intimidated them a bit about it being illegal to lie on the stand, that if they were found to be lying instead of confessing, they could end up going to jail. I guess it was enough to scare them because it was Karen in the end that ended up cracking and finally telling the truth. Karen, okay fine, I hired them to come and cut down the stupid tree. But it was their property, so they should still be responsible for the damage that it caused. Lawyer, you want them to pay for damage done by their tree? Damage caused only because you hired a company without their consent to cut down the tree? Karen, they refused to cut it down when I asked. Lawyer, are you aware that a permit is required for any citizen to get a tree removed from their property? Karen, yes, I'm aware of that. Lawyer, did you obtain any type of permit for the tree removal? Karen, no. Lawyer, then there's no reason they should be responsible for the outcome. Karen was livid and muttering about how she would just pay for the repairs herself. That was not how things were going to end though, because there were more issues to solve. The first one being between Karen and the town, because she did not get a permit in order to get any work done on the tree. Also, they tracked down the company she hired and found that they were not licensed and claimed that Karen knew this and offered them money under the table to remove the tree. They swear Karen told them it was on her property, so it was not any kind of issue. So she was getting a huge fine from them. I was also countersuing her because of the damage she had done to my tree. It might sound dumb to some people, but you cannot just get another tree like that. I would have to buy a sapling and it would take more than my lifetime for it to get back to how it was before. There is a huge process that I personally learned about during this entire lawsuit. She'd have to pay me not for the sapling but for what the tree she illegally cut down would be appraised as being worth. This took into account the size of the tree, the estimated age of the tree, the condition, and even how high the branches were. I had zero clue this much went into tree appraisal, or even how the professionals figured some of this stuff out. Anyway, we were actually lucky that Karen did not bother to get the tree removed from her house though, because it gave him the ability to accurately measure it and get all the information right. The last thing taken into account was the rarity of the tree based on current population density. Maybe I'm just a nerd, but I found that entire thing a little bit amazing. At the end, me and my lawyer were consulted about a price to get for it. My jaw almost hit the ground when the arborist said it was worth around $240,000. You can be sure that I was suing Karen for every single penny of that. You can also be sure that she complained about the entire thing because of how much money it was gonna cost her to fix her home, and paying me meant that she wouldn't be able to fix her own home. She wanted to fix it first and give me whatever she might have left over afterwards. That was not the way things worked, and she instead had to pay me and pay for the stump to be removed first. I couldn't help but have to hide a grin when she finally realized she had lost. The first thing I did with the money I got was to get another white pine tree sapling and plant it on my property. It would not be big for a long time, but I wanted to make sure that one day a tree would stand there again. After that, I decided to have a little bit of fun and rub salt in Karen's wounds at the same time. Most of the money went into savings, but a small percentage of it went into improving the house and buying some new amenities. This included a nice patio deck for the backyard where we could grill and eat outside without having to be on the grass. Another one was a big outdoor trampoline for my kids who had been asking for one for a while. All in perfect view for Karen to see and become more jealous of, as she had no choice but to look at it. We did not go crazy, but it was just enough to make it so that Karen seemed to have a constant sour face whenever we would see her. Now, as far as her house was concerned, that was even better in my opinion. They had the tree removed and I could tell that they needed some serious work done on both the roof and having a small section of the house rebuilt. The only issue was that after the money they had to pay me every month, the courts worked out a payment plan because most people won't have the full amount right away, they did not have much left. They ended up having to get a very basic and cheap job done to get their house fixed. To be honest, it looked even worse considering it was just a section of the house, so it really stuck out to anybody looking at the house. Imagine an adult drawing a picture of a house and then a 3-year-old toddler deciding they wanted to help and draw some of it. You'd be able to tell right away the part the 3-year-old did, and that is the best comparison I can come up with for their house. I knew that Karen was embarrassed and over the months kept having small bits of work done on the section. Nothing worked out though, and it was clear it needed to be fully redone, but they did not have the money. I did not feel bad at all because they really did all of this to themselves. Karen made a partial attempt to get revenge on me by telling neighbors that I sued her for all her money and her kids were gonna starve. The thing was that since she had a reputation of being entitled, nobody was gonna believe her side of the story. They wanted to ask me and I had no issues telling them exactly what happened. That she destroyed my tree and caused it to fall on her own house. And that I did sue her for the tree and refused to pay for damages that she obviously caused on my property. Everybody believed me over her, and her attempt at getting revenge back at me failed. Instead, she would try to avoid me at every single turn, and when she did see me, it was with a sour face. On the other hand, I chose to act extremely friendly whenever I saw her and wave and talk about how nice the weather was. It was hilarious because the nicer I was, the angrier she seemed to get. I expected her to just yell at me or something, but that never happened. And yeah, Ripe Stars, you could say in the end OP killed Karen with kindness, which is obviously the best way to deal with an entitled Karen, at least in this story. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.